The New Zealand rabbit is one of the top rabbits bred for meat around the world. We'll talk about that and more fun rabbit facts while I sketch a little Hassenpfeffer here. So let's just turn the page and get started. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is 5:30 in the morning on a, goodness, is it Tuesday morning already? Tuesday mornings at 5:30 in the morning, I like to do a little thing where I pull a toy from the toy box, a random object from the Random Object Randomogrifier, if you will, and I draw it, and we talk about it. And today's random object from the Random Object Randomogrifier is a New Zealand rabbit. Now, New Zealand rabbits are big, and they get big quick. That's what people like about them. That's what makes them really good for the meat industry. They are about 20 inches long and about 10 pounds, and they get pretty big pretty quick. They get up to 5 pounds within the first 10 weeks. And so every 16 weeks, a breeding pair of rabbits can produce 16 pounds of meat in offspring. Now, that may sound atrocious to people who love rabbits, or it may sound fantastic if you love rabbit. Depends on how you love your rabbit.
Joe's here.
Good morning, Joe.
Going to be watching on his TV because YouTube crashing his phone.
Joe, have you ever had a New Zealand rabbit for dinner? If you had rabbit for dinner, did you know if it was New Zealand rabbit? The name is New Zealand rabbit, but there's controversy. They don't really know how it got the name. It's 100% American breed. Of course, they have them in New Zealand now, but they're not from New Zealand. It's thought that maybe there was a New Zealand stock that they used to breed with the Belgian hares to get the New Zealand rabbit breed, but there's no evidence of that. That's conjecture after the fact. They know that it was being developed on both coasts, the east and west coast of the United States, and it's considered a California breed now. But when it was named, it had never been to New Zealand. Had never been in New Zealand. But of course now it's one of the top breeding animals in New Zealand. One of the top breeding rabbits anyway. It is 100% an American breed though. And he said his Opa raised and sold meat rabbits. So yes, he's had rabbit. Do you know if it was a New Zealand rabbit? I wouldn't know. We had white rabbits. I couldn't tell you if they were New Zealand rabbits. I just remember they were big. I couldn't tell you if they were New Zealand rabbits. They were meat rabbits. The white rabbit was an accident, but it became the staple. But the red rabbit is probably why it was named, because it reminded people of New Zealand. Reminded the breeders of New Zealand. But the rabbits that we had were white and probably New Zealand rabbits, because again it's one of the most popular meat rabbits out there, and they are big and they get big fast. And if you're an animal lover, if you're the kind of person who gets upset at the thought of animals being eaten, then you're probably not going to like the fact that it's a meat rabbit. But if you are the kind of person who thinks Hossepfeffer is a funny joke or a name for a rabbit, you may find today's facts interesting. Dude, that's a lot of pencil marks. I think I'm done with pencil for a while. Gaming Joe says I've dispatched thousands. You know, I didn't kill that many rabbits. I did the chickens. Granny would buy fryers in boxes of 50.
Correction.
I'm sorry?
Your grandfather would.
Well, I'm sorry, my grandfather would buy fryers in boxes of 50. And
that's as far as his involvement went.
And that's just as far as his involvement went. Anyway, he would buy fryers in boxes of 50, but when it came time to dispatch, that's a good word. When it came time to dispatch of the fryers, that was my job, because I was the only one that could do it without issue, without nightmares. Tell me, Clarice, can you still hear the chickens scream?
They were also these rabbits. They were fast growing.
Yeah. Fryers get fat real quick, and they get to the point where they can't even hold themselves up with their own legs. So it's kind of a mercy euthanasia.
There's Rick.
Good morning, Rick. Joe said he looked for the little whites from Florida, but can't find them in this area. Me and had to California for a few years back, but couldn't handle the heat here too well. Do. Do. Yeah, the white rabbit was an accident, but once they discovered it, it made it. They fought to make it its own breed, because it didn't take them long to figure out that white fur could be dyed any color. The red fur had to be bleached to be dyed any color, but the white fur could be dyed any color. The same revelation that sheep farmers came up with when faced with white or black sheep.
Joe said his OPA raised and sold commercially. Then the government started requiring super expensive dispatch routes, and he supplied the local IGA also.
Yeah, when the government steps in and makes you do it, they say humanely. I say expensively, because they're trying to protect their farms. They're trying to protect the donors.
California rabbit he had were New Zealand's crossed with a chinchilla, he thinks.
Can you cross a rabbit with a chinchilla? Or is there a rabbit type called a chinchilla?
Pamela's here. Good morning, Artie. She had to get her HARE done, so I'm running behind her hair done.
Good morning. Good morning, Pamela. do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Rabbits are, fun fact, rabbits are hindgut fermenters. When you are a vegetarian and you eat a high fiber diet, you need a very long digestive tract because that stuff is very hard to break down. And a lot of times you need a pit to ferment the fiber so that your digestive tract can pull it out, can pull everything out. Cows do this by having an extra stomach. A lot of herbivores do it by having a super long digestive system with extra pockets for fermentation. Rabbits do it, but most of the time when they do that, the fermentation happens before the small intestine, before the large intestine rather. And the reason is because that way, as it's fermenting, then when it passes through the rest of the system, they can absorb the nutrients. And I say that's the reason. The benefit of it is that then it can absorb the nutrients as it goes to the rest of the system. I don't really know if that's the reason it happens or not. But rabbits do it in their hindgut, which is after the small intestine. And so there's not a whole lot of time to absorb the nutrients. So they developed kind of the same thing the koalas did. They have a cecum where they expel a parrot called a cecotrope, and it is a pre-digested fermented pellet. It is not poop. To us, it looks like poop because it comes from the same area, but it is a pre-digested fermented pellet that they expel from the same area, and they eat that, and they have to eat it or they will die. They eat that because it's the only way they can get their nutrients from the food that they eat. No, they can't get the nutrients fast enough from their normal diet, so they have to do that.
Joe says there is a chinchilla breed of rabbit.
Okay, that makes sense then. I was like, no, I don't think they're crossbreeding with chinchillas.
They're known for their coats.
Ah. The same as the actual chinchillas.
Yes. They're French.
This is my favorite part. French rabbits. Wee wee. You know, it's funny, that's the first place we all go. Wee wee. Because it's the only French.
Yes.
It's about the only French we all remember.
I think every language has that one word you go to.
Michel, ma belle. Wah, 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 wah. This is my favorite part. This is the part that makes it into a shape, a dimension, not just lines on the page. I probably never told you all that. I love you, I love you, I love you. That's all I want to say. Sorry, I got caught up on the French connection there. All right. And we need a shadow on the face of it. But yeah, if they didn't eat that cicatrix, they wouldn't be able to get the right nutrients from it. They wouldn't be able to absorb all of the nutrients from their food.
Joe says squirrels will feel better. He wishes he could raise the tree rats.
Yeah, they're not domesticated though. Remember, all the animals that are domesticated themselves. I am kind of shocked that we don't have more domesticated rats. We domesticated the cat that comes to hunt the rat, but we didn't really domesticate the rat. I am kind of shocked about that. But these things show up and start eating our food out of our gardens when we first learn how to garden. All the animals, when we first start learning how to garden, they start coming up and eating our food out of our garden. We start sharing food around them so that they will come around and make them easier to catch. And we ended up domesticating them. So my argument is that all the domesticated animals domesticated themselves. Let me dry this real quick and then we'll add some color. Joe's talking about the squirrels. He wished he could domesticate squirrels because their meat is better, he thinks. And he's talking about the squirrel in his backyard, how it throws pecans at him. Joe, I was stationed on Fort Sill, and Fort Sill is covered in pecan trees. Fort Sill is in Lawton, Oklahoma, and it's covered in pecan trees. And we would be in formation under a copse of pecan trees, and the squirrels would just be up there. We're supposed to be at the position of attention. We're supposed to be, we're supposed to be serious, standing there at the position of attention, and the squirrels would just be up there pelting us with pecans to get us out of their area. And I know the NCOs were aware. I know they knew it. And I'm sure they thought it was funny to challenge our discipline of whether or not we could maintain the position of attention while being pelted by squirrels. I'm quite sure they had a good laugh about it. They bark at, Mom says they bark at the birds in the bird feeder. Rabbits don't bark. Not that I know of. They have a squeak noise that they make every now and then. But for the most part, they don't bark. You know what? I said that. There may be rabbits that bark. I've never heard a rabbit bark. I just only ever remember them making a real high-pitched whine.
Yeah, they more of a squeak.
More of a squeak. The New Zealand rabbit is bred 100% from European stock. The European stock came from the European hare. There are no American hare interbreeding into the New Zealand rabbit. Officially, it doesn't mean it didn't happen occasionally along the way and it just was not documented, but there officially is no No American hare interbred into the New Zealand rabbit. Most domestic rabbits are descended from the wild hares in Europe, because most domestic rabbits around the world are descended from European domestic rabbits. I'm really surprised. Of course, the natives in the Americas, they domesticated like guinea pigs. They didn't domesticate rabbits. They domesticated guinea pigs. But I'm really surprised that they didn't domesticate rabbits. They domesticated parrots, and they domesticated guinea pigs. But they didn't domesticate capybaras, and they didn't domesticate rabbits, and I'm kind of shocked about that. But in the Americas, it wasn't primarily the civilizations weren't primarily agricultural like they were in the old world. How are we doing on time? Oh, it's 5:52. I mean, we're not in a hurry, but we kind of need to step up this game. Kind of need to step this game up just a touch. All right.
Joe says he's eating guinea pigs, and then he says in Ecuador.
Yeah, it's a staple down there.
The world travel.
I never made it south. I never made it north. I made it to sand. I made it to Iraq. I was in Italy briefly. We were on the plane in Italy, and they said if you look out the window you can see, and then we took off again. Spent about 18 hours in Spain. Let me dry this real quick and we'll ink it. Wonder how many guinea pigs I could raise in the backyard to get the farm exemption. Or rabbits.
You'd have trouble getting rid of them.
I would eat them.
I repeat, you would have difficulty.
Up until the 70s, this particular rabbit was kept by hospitals all over the world as the primary method of testing for pregnancy. They discovered in the 30s, I think it was in the 30s, 20s, might have been the 20s when they discovered it, and officially made it a standard in the 30s. they discovered that human hormones produced during pregnancy that you could find in a woman's urine would change the nature of the ovaries in a rabbit. And so for the better part of the middle of the 20th century, they would take the hormones and they would inject them into the rabbit and then cut the ovaries out of the rabbit and examine them and determine if a woman was pregnant. That was the final word. That was how you got the official. And the slang for that was to say, well, the rabbit died, meant that you were pregnant. So if you've ever had the doctor tell you that the rabbit died, you probably have grandkids by now. Even though that test has been out of fashion since the early 70s. Doctors still use the terminology. And even though every time they ran the test, the rabbit would die because they had to cut the ovaries out of it. It was one of the reasons why Radar did not want Hawkeye to use his pet rabbits for Major Houlihan's pregnancy test, because it would kill his rabbits. And they ended up surgically removing, anesthetizing and surgically removing the ovaries from the rabbit instead of killing them in the television series MASH. But New Zealand rabbits are still one of the most popular animals used in laboratory testing because of their similar toxicology to humans and their certain features like their eyes react similarly to stuff as us. But it is worth noting that 80 to 90% of medicines that start with animal testing, especially with rabbits, 80 to 90% of it fails when it gets to the human tests. What is today? Today is the 9th. So it's not an effective means to do it anymore. Computer models are way more effective, but they're still working out the kinks of June. I still contend there are plenty of prisoners in the world. There's no reason to harm the animals. All right. But as a food stock, 570 million of these things were slaughtered. In 2021, 570 million of them were slaughtered, 860,000 tons worth about $1.5 billion worth of meat. And China was easily half of that. So I could probably hit that with some vermilion or with some scarlet. I'm not going to. I'm going to call it done. I don't want to overwork it. So there is my version of it compared to the photograph. Let's see it from my perspective. Oh, yeah. Joe's talking about the rabbits in their backyard succumbing to the heat. Was that in Oklahoma or California? You mentioned it earlier. You mentioned California earlier. But yeah, it's pretty bad when you come home and find out that they've succumbed to the heat. Dun, dun, dun. So there it is from my perspective. He says it was in Oklahoma. So that's what I did this morning. Tomorrow, what do we have tomorrow? What could it be? What could it be? The suspense. The suspense is what gets you. Oh, yeah. Tomorrow we have the Liberty Bell. The first Liberty Bell didn't make it when it came across the Atlantic. It came from London in 1752, and the very first time they rung it, it cracked. And so they took it, and John Stowe and John, what's the other guy's name? Park. Was it Park and Stowe? John Parks and John Stowe took it and made it again, and the second one had a dull sound to it, and everybody laughed at them. So they finally made a third one, and it cracked also, and they just left it. And so that is the Liberty Bell that we know today. We'll talk about that and more fun. Of course, that was probably all the really, really interesting stuff about the Liberty Bell. We'll talk about that and more fun Liberty Bell facts while I sketch this little ringer tomorrow morning at 5:30 in the morning. And so you're going to want to set your notification bell so you don't miss that. But guys, thank you so much for joining me. I do look forward to this every day. Joe says he has a tattoo of that bell. That's an interesting tattoo. You're going to have to send me a picture of it. We'll show it off on Thursday. Thank you so much for joining me. This is my favorite part of the day when I get to art with my besties. I do look forward to it every day. It holds me accountable to my art practice and is often the only art I get to do. But be sure and tune in tomorrow. Same Artistic Biker time, same Artistic Biker channel. We dance. We dance until somebody says they see me dancing, because when they see me dancing, I will know that the lag has caught up with the stream. It would make sure that I don't get cut off mid-sentence. It gives everybody a chance to say hello and goodbye to each other. It gives everybody a chance to ask any questions if they have any questions. And it gives you a chance to click the clicky thingies this way if you're on the horizontal, or this way if you're on the vertical. So, but the most important part of the whole thing